Debt-Free in 30, where every week we take 30 minutes and get practical advice from industry experts about personal finance and living debt-free. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
We have record levels of debt in Canada. The average Canadian has debt equal to almost 170% of their annual disposable income, and that's the highest level in history. You would think that if we Canadians are carrying record levels of debt, we would also have a record level of bankruptcies, but that's not the case. In fact, in Ontario, adjusting for increases in the population, consumer insolvency rates are at 15-year lows. So how is it possible that we have more debt than ever before, and yet we are not going bankrupt at record rates? Well, believe it or not, the answer is that the level of debt we carry is not the main factor that determines whether or not someone will file bankruptcy. Interest rates are at record lows, so even with a high level of debt, the carrying costs of that debt are also at record lows, so if you have a good income, you can carry high levels of debt. So who is it that is going bankrupt, even in our current low interest rate environment? That's the question we're going to answer on today's special edition of Debt-Free in 30, and the answer, well, it may surprise you. As required by law, we gather information about every person who files a consumer proposal or bankruptcy with our firm, Michalos. That includes details on their age, gender, income, expenses, what they own, and who they owe. Then, every 2 years, we take all that data, crunch the numbers, and develop a profile of the average person who files for relief from their debts. We call this person Joe Debtor, and in our new Joe Debtor study that we just released this week, we analyzed the details of almost 7,000 residents of Ontario who filed a bankruptcy or consumer proposal with Michalos in 2015 and 2016. This is the sixth Joe Debtor study we've done since 2008, so we compare this study to our prior studies to identify any trends. So what did we find out? Well, to find out, let's welcome back to the show my Michalos co-founder and business partner, Ted Michalos. Ted, are you ready to talk about Joe Debtor?
Let's go at it. It's a detailed report. This is going to take some time.
Well, it is, and we'll be flipping through lots of pages as we talk, so we want to get all the numbers right. So, like you said, it's a big report. It's 26 pages long, which is available on our website at hoyes.com, or you can go to our special URL, joedebtor.ca, and it'll take you directly to the report and all our findings. So, I don't want to spend too much time talking about numbers. Listeners who are interested obviously can get them from our report. We will mention some numbers, but I'm more interested in the big picture. So let's start with the overall rate of insolvency. So how low are they?
All right, well, so let's go back to the financial crisis of 2008. I remember Labor Day that year. Our phones just started ringing off the hook. So the peak number of personal insolvencies occurred in 2009, and they've actually been declining every year since. So the personal insolvency rate for 2016 in Ontario is around 3.6 people for every 1,000 aged 18 and over. So that means that for every 1,000 people, 3.6 of them declare themselves to be insolvent in 2016. That's a 15-year low.
Yeah, the last time it was that low was back in 2001.
Yeah, that's right.
So, okay, why? Why then are some people still going bankrupt then?
Well, so as you said, most Ontarians are carrying an awful lot of debt, but they can keep up with their payments. The folks that are filing insolvency today are more likely to be experiencing financial distress even before you look at their debt. So their income is going to pay for their living expenses, their rent, their mortgage, whatever, that sort of stuff. I think the biggest financial stress for people having troubles is that they're having issues with their income. So their income is lower than the average for people living in Ontario. Their income is intermittent. That means they don't have steady regular work, or they've got stagnating income. So they haven't had an increase, but their costs of living keep going up.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's certainly what we're seeing. There's a lot more people working contract jobs and temp jobs and that sort of thing. So I don't want to get buried in the numbers here, but you said lower incomes. So how much lower are we talking about here?
So some of this you need to fully understand it. The average household income from our Joe Debtor study, so remember that's the study where we analyze what our clients declared, was $2,900 per month. That's 41% the median for Ontario. The median for Ontario is like $4,900 a month. So almost two-thirds of insolvent debtors are in the bottom quartile of income in Ontario.
Yeah, and that's obviously a big deal if you're not earning the same kind of income. So I can understand why someone earning, let's say, $2,000 or less per month, which is like about 29% of the households we help would have trouble meeting their living expenses. But roughly a third of the people who go bankrupt or file a consumer proposal have income between $2,000 and $3,000 a month, which, and that's not poverty level income. So why are those people having such a hard time?
All right. So those folks, it really is because of the debt. In our study, we determined that the average person that files is carrying average debt of $52,000 or thereabouts. And the cost of servicing that debt, well, it's pretty significant. So they've got a bunch of personal loans, they've got credit cards, they've got income tax debt, they've got student loans, and they've got other. Other includes payday loans, and I knew you were going to get me going on that later.
We'll try to. Well, so tell me about what it costs to live in a month then.
Yeah, so their average living cost for the folks that file with us is $2,600 a month. Now remember what I just told you. Their average income is $2,900 a month. They've got $300 a month left over to make payments on that $52,000 worth of debt. And I can tell you that the interest payments on $52,000 a month are $960 a month.
Yeah, and obviously that's a blended rate we're using based on what people owe on credit cards, bank loans and so on. But yeah, you're right. It's costing roughly $2,600 a month to live, and that's, housing costs of around $1,200, and transportation costs are over $500, and everything else.
Well, people got used to eating. There's probably some money for food in there.
Food goes into that too. So that's the number. So let's talk about then the person, the actual real person who is in that situation. So what's it like on a day-to-day basis for them?
Well, so it's a vicious cycle for these folks. Remember, they've got $2,900 coming in, and they spend $2,600 on it just to live. That leaves them with $300 to make payments towards those debt. And we told you that the minimum payments are going to run them $900. So what they do is they make a payment on the first one, and then they take it out again and make it on the second one, and then they take it out and make it on the third one, or worse, they take on new debt to cover the old debt. Payday loans, installment loans, all of this stuff just drives me crazy, but they've got to find a way to pay the bills.
And so these are the typical people we're meeting with.
That's right. Let me give you an example. We never used to see this, but I had a fella in to see me last week. He only had $18,000 worth of debt. That sounds like something he should be able to manage. His take-home pay was about $2,400 a month, but of that $18,000, $15,000 of it were either payday loans or installment loans. I mean, the minimum payments for this fellow were twice what his take-home pay was. So he's in a cycle that you just can't break unless somebody's going to come along and suddenly give him, $18,000 to pay off his debts. He has no choice when he makes the payday loan payment to go out and take the money again. He's not a bad guy. He didn't do anything wrong. He's working 2 jobs. He just can't make ends meet. He can't afford to live and pay his bills.
Yeah, the math just doesn't work. Now, we talked about housing costs, so I would think, we know what's happening in the housing market. Isn't this really helping everyone then?
Well, it only helps the folks that have houses. I mean, over the years, we've seen a steady decrease in the percentage of people filing that owned homes. At one point, it was 1 in 3. I think now we're down to less than 1 in 5. So it's like, in fact, it's even lower than that. It's more like 1 in 6.
Yeah, so, 17%.
Right. So that basically means that the folks that own homes are able to either refinance or somehow they're able to deal with their debt better because they've got more options available to them. Homeowners are the only group of clients that we've done an analysis where the debts are lower than they were 2 years ago. Oh, sorry, I got that backwards. Actually, their total debts are lower, but their unsecured debts are higher because they can afford to carry more debt.
Right, that's the whole key. House prices go up, so great. I can now refinance, or I've got the ability to borrow. So it's obviously a serious problem. So,
well, and one of the things to keep in mind too is that 1 in 10 of the folks that do own houses have negative equity, which means they're not in trouble yet, but they can't refinance the house. They're already underwater as far as the house is concerned. So they are at risk. They're the next group of people that are going to come see us.
Yeah, so even if you own a house, that doesn't mean you're completely secure. That's the whole problem here. You're and what happens when the housing market isn't continually going up? Then you've got a much more serious problem.
You mean when the bubble bursts?
Exactly.
Isn't that what we call that?
That's exactly what. In fact, we've done shows on exactly that. Go to our website and search for When the Bubble Bursts, and you can hear Hilliard Macbeth's thoughts on that. So let's go back to this discussion of debt then. So you already said it that in our study, the average debt that Joe Debtor is carrying is $52,634. And since our study covers a 2-year period, that's the average unsecured debt owed by all of our clients who filed with us over the last 2 years, 2015, 2016. So we drilled down a bit deeper and actually looked at the debt levels by, that's interesting, devils. When you compare debt levels, it becomes devils. That is a little Freudian slip there. So when you compare the debt levels by year, it's really, quite stunning. So we're carrying record levels of debt, but that's not what we found for Joe Debtor. Canadians are, but in fact, Joe Debtor's total unsecured debt is going down. So tell me the numbers.
All right. Well, so let's look back a few years. Remember, we do this every 2 years. That's when we analyze our data. The peak was back in 2012. So the average debt load carried by the person declaring themselves to be insolvent was $60,000. That's just unsecured debt. So that's credit cards, lines of credit, income taxes, payday loans. It's dropped a couple of $1,000s every 2 years that we've done the study since then. So now we're down to the lowest level since we started doing the survey at $52,000. It's 15% lower than the peak. Well, when you think about it, total debt levels are probably 15% higher for the average Canadian. So our group of people, it's actually going backwards, which you'd think would be a good thing.
Yeah, you'd think. And so in fact, in 2016, when we average 2015, 2016, we get around 52,000. Well, that's because 2015 was around 54,000 and 2016 was down to 50,000.
Right.
If this trend continues, we could very easily see, next time we do this study, unsecured debt levels of less than 50,000, even though it was, as you said, 60,000 back in 2012. So,
right.
So what am I missing here? Debt levels are going down, but everyone in our study still had to go bankrupt or file a proposal. So what gives here?
Well, one of the things that an average number hides is the cost of carrying that debt. So the folks that are becoming insolvent, declaring bankruptcy or a proposal, are using more expensive subprime borrowing. So that means that as opposed to having that great credit card at the low interest rate, 11%, they've probably got the credit card at 18, 19, 21%. In fact, if you look at the way the debts have broken down, the total amount of debt that they're carrying in the most expensive types of credit, and here's where you're going to get me going on payday loans, is higher, and it increases every year.
Yeah, so I'll try to keep you away from the payday loans because I know I get you all
we could do a whole
up.
show on that.
Well, in fact, we did. Show number 130, which was right at the end of February. We actually pre-released some of our Joe Debtor stats just as it related to payday loans, and you're absolutely right. I mean, there are more debtors now who have a payday loan than before.
But let me give you an easy comparison for us to understand. So let's say that you've got that $53,000 of unsecured debt in a line of credit. And probably if you've got a line of credit at that level, the bank thinks you're a pretty good risk and they'll charge you 5% interest. So your monthly payment's $220. Not a big deal. The average Joe Debtor, the fellow that becomes insolvent, doesn't have a line of credit. He's got personal loans, credit cards, income taxes, student debt. Remember what I said earlier? Their average monthly payments are $960. Same level of debt, 4 times the payment.
Yeah, so it's the type of debt that you have that is what's causing you all the grief. So,
that's right.
So, yeah, I mean, our clients have lines of credit, but you're right. It's not $52,000 worth. It's a portion of that. And when you throw in all the other high interest debt, it becomes a huge problem. So I can see a theme emerging here. This Joe Debtor, who is our typical person who files bankruptcy or consumer proposal, is vulnerable. I mean, his income is not as high as it needs to be, so he uses debt to survive. He gets a payday loan to carry to pay the carrying costs on his other debts. So instead of getting a payday loan at a 468% interest cost, why doesn't he just go get another credit card at 19%?
Well, the problem is he doesn't qualify. So he can't do that. Most of these folks know what the right answers are, but no one will help them out. So let's think about it this way.
Well, tell me about credit cards then. So
okay.
Why can't he just go and, I mean, that's what I would do. What is he actually doing when it comes to credit cards?
Well, credit card debt's going down. I mean, 2013, the average balance of credit cards was just under $24,000. Now it's down to $16,000. So that's a 1/3 decrease. That's an incredible drop. The problem, of course, is that they're still carrying more debt than they can carry, and it's the more expensive types.
Yeah, so they're trading in credit cards, which are still wickedly high.
Right, 18% is nothing to sneeze at.
It's ridiculous, but you can't even qualify for that, and so you're ending up with payday loans and the other higher interest ones. So that's obviously a massive problem. So break it down for me then in terms of the ages of people that we're seeing. I mean, I know that our typical person who files a bankruptcy or proposal has always been in that sort of mid-40s kind of age, and that's still the case today. But what other trends are we seeing?
Well, there's two very disturbing trends that quite frankly scare me a little bit. The millennials, so this is the under 29 age group, went from 12% of our filers to 14%. So it's a growing group of people. And this is the next generations of folks that have got to pay for our society. They're carrying student debt. They're carrying not as high levels of total debt, but unfortunately they're carrying high payday loan and expensive types of debt. The other group that really, we've been talking about this group now for a number of years because it's the fastest growing segment, are the seniors, the 60 plus crowd. 4 years ago it was 9% of filings. Now it's 12%. And the seniors carry the highest level of debt, the highest amount of payday loans. I'm the one who keeps bringing this up now.
Yeah, I know. It is a theme. So more than half of the people we deal with are between the ages of 30 and 49, and that makes sense. That's kind of your prime borrowing years when you're forming a family, buying a house, all that kind of stuff. But the percentage in those age groups has been dropping while the percentage at both ends, like you said, the younger and the older are going up. So what's your explanation for that? Why does that happen?
Well, intuitively that makes sense, right? Remember what we said. The Joe Debtor's income now is significantly lower than the mean or median income in Ontario. Remember, in Ontario household, the average income is $4,900, and our average Joe Debtor, it's $2,900. Well, so the millennials are just getting started. They're either just finished school, so they've got student debt, or they're in the workplace, but they're at entry-level jobs, or worse, they can't get full-time jobs. They've got 2 or 3 positions. The other end of the spectrum, you've got the seniors. The seniors, well, they're pensioners. Their income is fixed. So while their costs of living are going up, their pensions are not increasing at anywhere near the same rate. And what's worse, they probably carry debt into retirement.
Well, so let's break those two groups down and just very briefly talk about them. And I think maybe what we'll do is schedule some specific shows over the next few months to deal with each of these groups individually.
That's a good idea.
So let's talk about a millennial. I mean, to me, your typical millennial, and of course there's no such thing, they're all different, but they've got student loan debt, which is much more common, obviously, amongst younger people than older people. Their income might be a little bit lower. They might be lone parents. So what kind of advice, what are you talking to with millennials?
Well, and so the millennials, that's that 18 to 29-year-old age group. They're the folks that, again, they're just finishing school. They're just getting started in the workforce. And the concerns we have now is that they can't find the jobs that they need to cover their living costs and to service their debt. I mean, they got $14,000 worth of student loans on average. Their take-home pay is $2,300 a month. So remember what I said earlier. The average Joe Debtor take-home was $2,900 a month. So their income is significantly lower. A sidebar to this that I'm sure we're going to talk about in detail later is that a significant portion are females and they're single parents. That's we'll dedicate a show to that, I'm sure, because it's a whole different issue.
But you raise a critical point that if I'm a lone parent and I'm younger, which of course is the way it is, there are very lone parents with young kids who are 60 years old.
Right.
And I've got student debt that I've got to try to service, and I'm not able to find stable employment. I think that's really the absolute biggest issue that they've got. That it's not like the old days, well, I've graduated from grade 10, I can go get a job at the factory and work for 50 years. A lot of them end up going through college or university and still not being able to find something good when they get out. And that's really where the whole income problems come through.
For that particular segment, that's right. Yep. And almost for millennials as well. I mean, it's just the problem for millennials is bad. The problems for the single mom are worse.
Yeah, it's really compounded.
Yep.
So I think you're right. I think that's probably a dedicated show we'll want to do in the future, just exploring that. So let's talk about seniors then. So obviously, well, not obviously, but in a lot of cases, seniors don't have student loans.
Probably not.
But give me the profile of the kind of person you end up seeing who's a senior.
So again, seniors on a fixed income. They don't have the ability to go out there and generate more. Their working life is done. Now, that doesn't mean a number of them aren't working part-time, but if they have part-time jobs or second jobs, it's just so they can make their debt payments. A full 59% of them, so almost 2/3, are single. So half of those are divorced or widowed. So these are folks that were used to having a higher standard of living, a higher income, and now it's dropped significantly. They have no savings. As I said earlier, they probably carry debt into retirement, which is a major mistake. I mean, you've got to try and find a way to avoid it, and it's almost impossible to do these days. What I found interesting was 47% of them have tax debt. And so what that suggests is that they had savings, probably in RRSPs, and they cashed them out to cover their living expenses. I mean, the mistake that seniors make is that on Monday, they've got a job, they've got a regular pay, and on Tuesday they're retired and they've probably dropped their income by 2/3. And they haven't adjusted their living expenses for that period of time, and so they haven't got enough money to cover their living expenses, and they still got all that debt that they were carrying.
Yeah, and your point about 59% of them are single. Like you said, 47% of them are widowed or divorced, which obviously means the rest of them were never married or in a relationship to begin with. That is a massive change. And we've done a couple of shows on that with Victoria Rice, who wrote the book with Gail Vaz-Oxlade on the CEO of Everything, which deals with how to deal with becoming suddenly single. And it's a huge problem. If your spouse was the one who was always paying the bills, managing the finances, and now you're left to do it on your own, you may not have the skills to do it. Or even if your spouse was the one who did all the grocery shopping and cooking and all those sort of things, you've got to bring on a whole new set of skills. And when you combine that with the reduced income and the debt problems, it becomes obviously a very serious problem. So it's almost as though there are two different worlds here. You've got some people who bought a house 20 years ago and they're in great shape. You've got people who've had a stable job, never got laid off, they've got a good pension. Well, those people in general aren't the people who are coming to see us.
Those would be our parents'
That's right.
right?
Absolutely. And then you've got the people who, didn't benefit from the real estate boom. They've had sporadic employment. Maybe they've gone through, like you said, a divorce, or maybe they've had medical issues. So those are the vulnerable people who are using debt to survive. So,
well, and the key point to all of this is that those groups that are at risk, the millennials, the seniors, the single parents, they're in trouble before you even start looking at servicing their debt. They're using all of their income to pay their living expenses and then some, which is where the debt comes into play.
Yeah, they're using debt to survive. That's right. And
that was never the intention of debt. I mean, that was never the whole idea of the whole credit market. It's supposed to make your life better. It's not supposed to make your life worse.
Yeah, I mean, you buy a house and you use debt because you're getting something for it. You're right. Using debt to pay for your living expenses and having nothing to show for it is certainly not the idea. So, I mean, I think the most stunning thing is that the people that we're dealing with in most cases had significant financial issues even before the debt became a problem.
That's right.
Sporadic employment, all those kind of things.
We don't encounter people that were living high on the hog. These are not people that bought themselves a bunch of luxuries. They took all kinds of trips. They incurred the debt because their income doesn't match their living expenses, and their living expenses are not extravagant.
Yeah, and I think that's probably the biggest finding from our Joe Debtor study. There's this myth that people who file a consumer proposal or go bankrupt have racked up their debt for extravagant living, but it's just not the case. We've looked at all this data and we're, kind of bumping up against the clock here. So let's get into some practical advice. So if you are talking to someone who fits the profile of what we've just talked about, or if someone is listening to us today who fits the profile or has a friend or a family member who has gone through job loss, sporadic income, separation, divorce, medical issues, all these kind of things, what kind of practical advice can you give someone like that?
So probably the most important thing, folks, is to realize you're not alone. Money is one of those things that we don't talk about with anyone. You could be diagnosed with a serious disease, cancer or something equally horrible, and you'll talk to your family and your friends about it. You'll get them to help you. If you have financial problems, you don't talk to anybody, and you need to. You're not alone. Recognize the warning signs. So if you're starting to use debt, take advances on your credit cards, use your line of credit to pay your regular bills, you probably have a problem. If you've got to go get a payday loan, you probably have a problem. And like anything else, if you've got a problem, try and find some help. There's lots of help out there.
Well, and so what are the kind of things we are going to do for someone who is in that situation? They hear about this and they go, okay, now I was a bit embarrassed about all this because I thought it was my fault that I wasn't able to keep up with all my bills. But now that I realize, there's a bunch of stuff that's happened in my life. So I pick up the phone, I call the 310 plan hotline, or I go to hoys.com and find the form and send you guys a message, and you sit down with me. Yeah. How's it going to work? What are you going to talk to me about?
You know what? The first thing I'm going to ask you is what's changed. So why didn't you call me yesterday? Because usually there's something that's finally got you to realize I got a problem and I need some help. Then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at your situation. Well, so what does it cost you to live every month? How much money have you got coming in? So what does that leave you to deal with any other issues? So that, have you got an emergency fund? Probably not if you're talking to me. You've probably got excessive debt. We'll take a look at the debt. We'll take a look at how much money you have left to deal with it every month, and then we'll come together with a plan. Not everybody that talks to me has to file bankruptcy or proposal. In fact, the majority end up just needing some guidance. They need to be pointed in the right direction, and that's what we do.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way to end it, and I totally agree. I mean, most of our clients were in a difficult financial situation before they got into debt, and they ended up using debt to survive. So you're not alone. Don't be embarrassed about it. Don't suffer through it. There is help. We've got tons of resources over at hoys.com, and you can always call our office at 310 Plan if you or someone you know fits the profile of Joe Debtor. That's our show for today. Ted, thanks for being here. Full details on our Joe Debtor study, including lots of data, can be found at a special link, joedebtor.ca. Full show notes and a transcript of today's show and links to our Joe Debtor study can be found at hoys.com. That's HOYES.com. Thanks for listening. Until next week, I'm Doug Hoys. That was Debt Free in 30.